I mean,
Start it?
this is you. Already told me this next one.
Okay, that's me. Perfect. All right. Okay.
So you can keep
Let's get started on tonight's class. Excited to be here with everyone. We're just going to dive right in. Nice. Awesome. Okay, let's get started here. So, tonight's class is about Corona. No, just joking. It's not. It's about Tanya. So, okay, let's get started. So, it's about Tanya. I've actually been learning Tanya. Tanya is a very, very fundamental book in Chabad philosophy. It is, so to speak, it's the Bible of Hasidic philosophy. And I love Tanya. We learned it when I was in yeshiva. We spent many, many hours learning Tanya. Whenever you study anything, really, it always kind of comes back to Tanya. It is the Bible, just like in the way it works in the revealed part of Torah, that everything that's discussed in the Talmud and all of Rabbi Yochanan's teachings or Reish Lakish or all those teachings, those are all really said first and hinted to in the Bible. So too in the Torah. So when it comes to Hasidus, anything discussed in Hasidus is originally brought down in Tanya. It's the basis of everything that we talk about in Hasidic philosophy. So let's dive right in. So Tanya was written by a very, very special rabbi by the name of Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi. He's the founder of the Chabad movement. And he was a follower of the Mizritcher Magid, who was a follower of the Baal Shem Tov, who founded the entire Hasidic movement. So Baal Shem Tov founded the Hasidic movement. He founded the Hasidic movement really to increase joy of Jewish people. At the time, there was a lot of trouble. There was a lot of trauma. Many people, there were pogroms by Bogdan Khmelnytsky. The Jewish people were very, very down on themselves, and they didn't see, it was not looking good. And then there was a man by the name of Shabtai Tzvi, who was a false messiah, and he told everyone that I am the Mashiach, sell your houses, I will take you, you will travel with me to Israel, I am Messiah, and we are all just going to have a nice and dandy time in Israel, and we're going to live happily ever after. Turns out he was not a real Mashiach, he was a fraud, and many Jewish people sold all their possessions in order to move, right? They sold their houses, and they were getting ready to move to Israel, and all of a sudden it turns out this guy is not the real Mashiach, and he's a fraud. And so Jewish people, they thought that this was their savior after all their suffering, and they fell flat on their face again. That is when the Baal Shem Tov came to the scene, and the Baal Shem Tov taught something very revolutionary, and that was joy. He said we have to serve God with joy. So what does that mean? Why is that so profound? Okay, sure. You're happy. You serve God with joy. What's the big deal? So it's explained, the Baal Shem Tov was explaining that there's a certain joy that we all have from the soul. And when it comes to the soul, every single Jew has the same exact soul. So if it comes to studying Torah, there's many different levels. There's the great rabbis, there's the average, there's the mediocre, there's the below. You know, everyone understands Torah in their own way and according to their own mental capabilities. But when it comes to a soul, everyone has a soul equally. So when we do Torah, when we do the mitzvot, when we serve God out of the joy that we have a soul, a special connection with God, we all are equal. And we're all able to celebrate equally, and we're all able to be united. And so the Hasidic movement was really based on bringing Jewish people together, on focusing on what we all have in common, which is a soul, which is connected to God. and not on our different, our different mental capabilities, how much we could study Torah. It used to be, the big scholars, they would sit in the front of the synagogue, and the laymen, the simple people would sit in the back, and it was very separate. The Hasidic movement said, no, we all have a soul. We're all in this together. Okay, that's the Baal Shem Tov. Now, that's all very nice concept, but the Alter Rebbe, who was a follower of the main student of the Baal Shem Tov, so he was, so to speak, a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, because the Baal Shem Tov, then the Mizritcher Magid, was his student. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, came after the Mizritcher Magid, and he put a philosophy to it. He took these ideas and made it a thought out philosophy. He gave it was nice ideas, but he gave it a structure. And this structure he laid out in the Tanya, which is right here. This is what he looked like. There's only one picture of him. It's actually it's a picture. So let's dive right in. What is the Tanya? Why was it written? What's the point of it? So the Alter Rebbe he was a leader for about 20 years, and he kept on getting about the same 50 to 100 questions. Kept getting the same questions. And in any profession, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, real estate agent, commercial at CBRE, or whatever you do, shameless plug, whatever you do, you get generally, there's a range of questions that you get in your area of expertise. And he kept getting the same questions. So he said, why? I don't have enough time to meet with all the different Hasidim, all the followers. Instead, why don't I just make a book that will answer any question that I get? And we believe that he had the divine spirit, right? He was a godly man. And so therefore, he said, he had in mind for all future generations, any question that a person had in the service of God is going to be answered in this book, which is 53 chapters long, and it contains all the answers to serving Hashem the proper way. So just a little, let's talk about the Alter Rebbe for a second. The Alter Rebbe was a very, very special person. He suffered tremendously throughout his life. He was imprisoned. He was falsely accused of supporting the Turkish Empire, the Turkish government, against the Tsar of Russia, and he was thrown into jail. And it was false. It was opponents of the Hasidic movement that threw him into jail. He sat in jail for 53 days, which is corresponding to the 53 chapters of Tanya. And the reason why is because he revealed very, very deep secrets of the Torah that used to be only Kabbalists would study, only very, very righteous people. And the Alter Rebbe put it in a coherent way where anyone could just open the book and read it. And all of a sudden, these big secrets became accessible to anyone. And in heaven, the angels were pretty annoyed. They did not like it because they said these things only belong to angels or very, very holy people who act like angels, not just Joe the plumber. But the Alter Rebbe said, no, we have to share it with everyone. In the spirit of the Hasidic movement, right? That you reach out to everyone, no matter who they are, on their level. And the Alter Rebbe taught the Tanya, and he wrote the Tanya. And therefore, he sat in jail. It was, so to speak, there was divine intervention. Why? He got arrested because of that. It's also interesting, he was not a fan of Napoleon. When Napoleon came, when Napoleon was fighting with the Russians, the Alter Rebbe actually sent one of his Hasidim was a spy for the Tsar, and he spoke many languages. He was a translator working for the French army, and he was indeed a spy trying to help the Russian government. And the reason why is because the Alter Rebbe said that under the Russian government, it will be bad for the Jewish people physically, but it will be good for them spiritually. Under Napoleon, it will be good physically, but it will be very bad spiritually. There were other big tzaddikim, righteous rabbis that disagreed with the Alter Rebbe, and colleagues of the Alter Rebbe that disagreed with him. But anyway, that's just an interesting side note. Okay, let's dive right in. What's the Tanya? What's it all about? So, when it comes to serving God, we are all conflicted. Everyone has problems. No one's perfect. So, we're trying to understand why that is. Why aren't we perfect? Where are these problems from? Why do we have them? And how can we fix them? And so, for example, someone is in shul, he's davening, and all of a sudden he starts thinking about a football game. So he's naturally going to think, oh, my davening, my prayer, I didn't really mean it. If I really meant it, why would I be thinking about something not related to service of God, to Torah? And so a person might get down on themselves and say, oh, my prayer is not real. Or anything. Anytime someone's doing a mitzvah and all of a sudden they feel tempted to do not a mitzvah, to do something not good, they will feel bad about it. So the Alter Rebbe says, no, don't feel bad. You have two souls. You have a godly soul and you have an animal soul. And they are always fighting with each other. And therefore, when you're doing a mitzvah, you're using your godly soul. And your godly soul really means it. And it really wants to do the mitzvah. And when you are not doing a mitzvah, you're using your animal soul. And so when you're davening, no, that's real. The other thoughts, the distractions, that's from the animal soul. And so the goal is to separate the two, understand what's coming from what, and focus in on your godly soul. Okay, so let's dive right in. So what is expected of a person? So there are tzaddikim, there are righteous, there are wicked, and then there is a Beinoni. A Beinoni is in the middle. And we are all expected to try to be a Beinoni. We're all expected to be average. It says, Barasa Rishayim, Barasa Tzaddikim, right? That God created the wicked, and God created the righteous, right? So it's not in our control if we are a righteous person. That's out of our control. What's in our control is if we could be a Beinoni. So what does that mean? It means like this. A tzaddik is a special person like the Rabbi who doesn't have the urge to sin. He's literally born without the urge to sin. He is, so to speak, he's human, but he's as perfect as can be. But those are very, very few people. Most of us have a godly soul, we have an animal soul, and they fight. And so either we are a Rasha, right, which means wicked, or it means we are incomplete, or not doing what we need to do, or we are a Beinoni, which means we are winning, but we are fighting. And so the goal of all of us is to be a Beinoni. Okay, so how does this work? So in the beginning, there's a verse in the Torah, it says, Kikarev elecha hadavar ma'od beficha uvavavcha la'asaysay. This thing is very near in your heart, in your mouth, and in your heart that you should do it. And so the question is, it's not so easy. There's 613 commandments. It's not so easy to be a good Jew. It's really not so easy. So what does the Torah say? That Kikarev elecha hadavar ma'od. It's very close to you. What does that mean? It's not. So it's explained that if you have the proper motivation, it is. So first of all, what does it mean that the Torah is close to you? And how do you get that proper motivation? If you understand that, you really essentially understand what the Tanya is trying to do. So everyone has an animal soul which has its own intellect and its own emotions. A godly soul has its own intellect and its own emotions. And they are constantly fighting. Now, what are they fighting over? They are fighting over terrain. They are fighting over the person. What does that mean? They are fighting over the three garments of the soul. And a garment of the soul could either be using the godly soul or using the animal soul. One of the soul's garments could not use both souls, or cannot implement the will of both souls at the same time. And those three garments are like this. It is machshava, dibor, and maaseh, or thought, speech, and action. And so while you're thinking one thought, you cannot think another. If you're speaking Torah, you can't speak something that's not Torah. You can't speak something which is not holy. And if you're doing something holy at the same time, you cannot be doing something wrong, right? If you're doing one thing, you can't do two. It's impossible. So the godly soul is always trying to get us in our thought, speech, and action to do godly things. And the animal soul is always trying to get us in our thought, speech, and action to do animalistic things. And that's what they're fighting over. Now, the godly soul is different than the animal soul. The godly soul is dominated by the intellect. It's always trying to understand God through its chachma, bina, and da'as, which are the three levels of understanding. And through the three levels of understanding, which it will lead to the emotions, to feel the greatness of God in your heart. And from that, to serve God through your thought, speech, and action. The animal soul is trying to do the opposite. It's trying to stir up emotions for the physical world. From that, you will think in your mind about how to accomplish, how to get what I want. And from that, one second. And from that, oh gosh, it's making problems. Charger here. And from that, it will try to go get it in the animal soul's thought, speech, and action. So you got the godly soul and the animal soul. One is controlled by its thought, speech. One is controlled by its intellect. To go from the intellect, the godly soul is all about understanding Hashem. From the understanding comes emotions. From the emotions comes thought, speech, and action to serve God. From the animal soul, it's the opposite. From the emotions, you use the emotions. Okay, I want something. Now, how am I going to go get that? Well, I have to think. What's my strategy? And from my strategy, I'm going to use my thought, speech, and action to go actually get that. So I want something. How do I get it? I think about it, and then I talk about it, and then I go do it, right? So it's trying. So they both have opposite agendas, fighting over the same garments to the soul, the same thought, speech, and action. That's what they're fighting over. Okay, that is Tanya. I just broke down for you 12 chapters of Tanya. Missing a lot. I mean, there's a lot more to study, obviously, but that is the gist. That is the general gist. Now, how do you win in this fight? What's the strategy? Here's how you win. You got to have motivation. If you're trying to accomplish something, if you're fighting, you need to be highly motivated. That motivation is what will keep you going to overcome the animal soul. So, what does that mean? Practically, what does that mean? It means you have to have a love and fear of God, which is so strong and motivates you so much that you don't want to sin, because a sin will separate us from God, and a love of God and a mitzvah will connect us to God. So if you have a love and a fear of God, that will keep you on the straight and narrow path. So what do I mean by that? It means like this. When you do a mitzvah, you're connecting with Hashem. You are literally bringing God into you. When someone does a sin, they are separating themselves from Hashem. They are distancing themselves from God. So if you love and fear God, that is enough motivation to love, want to connect with Him, and fear, not want to disappoint Him, not want to be separate from Him. The love of God motivates us to put on tefillin, to light Shabbat candles, to eat kosher, to do all those things. And the fear of God is for all the negative commandments, to not break Shabbat, or to not do something which is forbidden, right? To not eat non-kosher food. Love of God motivates us to do all the positive mitzvot, the proactive mitzvot, and a fear of God motivates us from not doing something which is considered sinful, For example, stealing, murder, all those things. A fear of God stops you from doing that. So if you have a proper love and fear of God, that is enough motivation for your godly soul to not succumb to your animal soul. Okay, so how do you get this love and fear of God? It's all great. If I have a love and fear of God, that's enough motivation for me to keep the Torah and the mitzvot, to always be inspired to connect with God through my love of God, and to not disconnect with God through my fear. Now, how do I get that love and fear? So that's where we get to the next part of Tanya. And it's explained like this. Now, before we get there, what does God value more? Does he value the tzaddik, the guy that was born practically without an animal soul? Or does he like the Beinoni? Right? The average Joe who breaks himself to serve God. So it's explained like this. Just like when it comes to food, there are two types of food. There's sweet food, and then there is food with more of a sour, kind of more of a refined, it's not sweet, but it's enjoyable. It has more of a spicy or a sour taste. And although it's not sweet, people might even have a deeper appreciation of those foods. So too, when a tzaddik, who's a righteous person, serves God, it's easy, it's natural. But when someone who's a Beinoni serves God, he's breaking himself. So in a certain way, it means more to God when someone is breaking themselves, because that means it's real devotion. It's not easy. It's explained that the donkey drivers back in the day, to go, I think it was a mil, they would require 1 zuz. Or it was 10 mil. If you go 10 mil, you need to pay 1 zuz. But if you go 11 mil, then you need to pay not 1.1 zuz, you got to pay 2 zuz. Why do you have to pay double? Right? If you go 10, then you pay 1 zuz. If you go 11, you should pay just a little more. Why do you have to pay double? Because they were accustomed to going 1 mile. They were not accustomed to going any more than that. So if you break your nature even a little, it matters much more. Anyway, whatever, side point. So the Beinoni in a certain way gives God greater satisfaction because the Beinoni is breaking themselves. So when a person breaks themselves, it means more to God because it's not easy. It's a challenge, right? If God didn't want us to have challenges, we would have all stayed in heaven. We're down over here in this world where we don't see God, and we still choose to follow God because that means more. And there's many other explanations for why that we could get into, because specifically in this physical world, we're able to bring the greatest revelation of godliness that even in the spiritual worlds we can't have. And there's many different explanations for that. But on a general level, it means more when you break yourself. If it's not easy, it's valuable. And like it's said, there's a story of the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Tzemach Tzedek, he had a chassid that came in. He said, Rebbe, what should I do? I don't enjoy studying Torah. I have a big problem. The Tzemach Tzedek said, I have a bigger problem. I do like studying Torah. What did he mean by that? He meant that he wasn't able to serve God to his full capacity because he enjoyed it. It was fun. It was great. It was geschmack. If you like it, then it means less, right? It's just, I like it, right? What's the big deal? It's easy. Okay. So, how do you have the love and fear of God that motivates you to do good? So there are two ways. There is the way for intellectuals, and then there is the way for average people. The way for intellectuals is like this. You could probably guess already. You use your understanding to think about God. And when you think about God's greatness, it will automatically inspire a very deep love and fear of God. And from that understanding, your mind will come into your heart. And from your heart, it will inspire you to in your thought, speech, and actions to serve God. So thought, right? You use your mind to really think deeply in your intellect. And from your intellect, it will go into your emotions. And from your emotions, it will go into your thought, speech, and action. But that's tough because it requires something not very common called thinking, right? There was a chassid by the name of Binyamin Kletzker. He said he was a very, very smart man. I don't think he was the most friendly guy on planet Earth. Nice guy, not the most friendly. He said anyone who can't think about the same topic for 12 hours straight is just like a dog. So that makes, it's a little harsh. But the point is back in the day, especially when the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, people used to think about the same concept for hours and hours and hours on end. And so when someone could really think about the greatness of God for 12 hours straight, imagine the emotion they will feel from their thoughts, from their understanding. And from that should last the whole day. Okay, so that's one. And that's a very deep love and fear of God, which motivates you to, if you love someone, you want to connect with them. So love motivates you to do all the positive mitzvot, which cause a connection with God. And the fear motivates you to not disobey him, to not go against him. You don't want to disconnect with him and separate yourself from the king, from God. So the love and fear is what inspires you to do the mitzvah. Okay, so what if you can't focus for very long? What if you're a busy guy or busy girl, you got a lot going on and you just can't do it. So what you could do is all you have to know is that you have a present from God, and that is a hidden love of God. And if you're aware of it, it's good enough to keep you going throughout the day. Just awareness of it will bring out this love. So all you got to do is say, hey, I have this hidden love of God in my heart, and that will inspire you to feel that hidden love of God. And from that, you could use it to do all the mitzvot, to serve God in your thought, speech, and action. And it's explained that this explains this phenomenon that everyone has a hidden love of God in their heart, explains why many, many people throughout history that were totally atheists, did not believe in God, did not like it at all. They gave up their lives when someone said, hey, do you want to be a Jew? Or you convert, or I'll kill you. And they said, kill me. I will never give up my Judaism. Where did that come from? Many of these people, there's many stories of, there was a guy, he was a big bad guy, he never went to shul, never nothing, was totally separated, didn't want to have anything to do with any of his Jewish brothers and sisters, and this was in a small town in Poland. And one day, he was walking, and he was very not good to the Jewish community, but he was a Jew, right? His mother, he came from Jews. One day he was walking, and he saw that the temple caught on fire, and he risked his life to run into synagogue and to save the Torah scroll from burning. Why would he do that? What does he care? He didn't live a Jewish life. He didn't care about it. He wasn't involved. What does it matter? Why would he risk his life? So it's explained because deep down he has this hidden love of God. And it only comes out when it's crunch time. It only comes out, it's like this adrenaline. It only comes out when he feels like he is backed up against the wall. So on an average day-to-day, he doesn't feel it. But if he feels like his Judaism is at stake and it's do or die, he'll give up his life rather than his Judaism. And so if we are aware of that hidden fear and love of God, that will be good enough to motivate us throughout the day. Okay, so there's two ways to inspire yourself to fear and love God. And that fear and love God, that inspiration will keep you to think, talk, and speak only mitzvah, only good deeds. All right. So that is a lot of the basis of Tanya, explained right there. So, what else does Tanya talk about? So Tanya talks about a couple things. There's something else which is explained in Tanya, which is very fundamental. And that is that really the world shouldn't exist. It doesn't make any sense that the world exists. Why? If God is the one and the only true existence, then how could there be a world, right? A world, if you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, we all are our own independent, talking, thinking beings. How does that make sense? If God is the one and the only true being, how could there be something outside of him? If something is real truth, it's everlasting. The word truth in Hebrew is emes, which is aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, mem, the middle, and taf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Something true is true in the beginning, it's true in the middle, it's true in the end. In other words, it's consistent and it doesn't change, it doesn't end, it's always. If God is true, real true, so then he is, right, he is a true being, then that means really he is the only being, because he is the only true being. How does anything else exist? So it's explained that really, you're right, the world should not exist. Why does the world exist? How does it exist? It exists because God, so to speak, forces the world to keep going. In other words, God is constantly recreating the world. So what does that tell you? That tells you really the world shouldn't exist. It doesn't deserve to. It appears separate from God, and nothing is separate from God. And how could the world have the chutzpah to appear separate from God? So it shouldn't. God, so to speak, forces the world into creation every single second. So what does that matter? Why is that relevant? It's relevant because if anything is around, that means it has purpose. Everything has a spark of godliness in it. If God created the world and then the world exists, so maybe God left. Maybe he's still watching over. But how involved is he? He created it, and now the world runs on its own. But if the world shouldn't exist because the world existing is a problem, how could it exist? How could something be outside of God? And so God, so to speak, needs to be recreating it every second. So then that tells you that there's godly energy within every single thing. And this is a huge part of the Hasidic movement. Why is it that there's Chabad Shluchim throughout the world? How come? The world is a dangerous place. You have so many Chabad Shluchim in all these very, very crazy places. In Las Vegas, many Chabad Shluchim all over the world in the craziest. In Ibiza, I think there's a Chabad Shliach in Spain, very crazy place. A lot of these crazy, crazy places. How could you be there? Why does Chabad belong there? Why does Judaism belong there? It's a crazy, crazy place and very dangerous spiritually. So it's explained it's the opposite. If godliness is within every single thing, so who has home court advantage? What should a place really be? Should it be separate from God or connected to God? Mitzvahs done there. So if you look at the world as separate from God and something appears separate and appears like Judaism doesn't belong there, so then you're right. Why should there be Chabad there? Why should there be a synagogue there? But if the world is created by God every second, and God is putting a piece of vitality, a piece of godliness into every single thing to keep it going, so what does that tell you? That tells you that really the question is what's Vegas doing there, right? Because God is recreating this every second. It's godliness. So what is shtus? What is something separate from God doing there? You can't ask, what is the shliach, the Chabad rabbi, what's he doing there? What do you mean? It's God is recreating whatever it is every single second. This is godliness. So of course he's there. The question is on everyone else. What are they doing there? Right? So you look at the world, in other words, you have built-in home court advantage. And so when you have an obstacle, you don't really take it so seriously because you say, look, this is a piece of godliness, recreating this every second. Of course, I'm going to be able to use this opportunity for God and to do a mitzvah. The fact that it's able to appear like I can't do a mitzvah, that's the crazy thing. The fact that I'm able to use it to do good, that's obvious. Of course, there's godliness in this, and God wants me to use this to do the right thing. So that's another teaching. And you could obviously meditate on that and use that to inspire love and fear of God. But that's another teaching which kind of helps understand the Chabad approach, that there's godliness in everything. So, if we had to summarize tonight's class, there is an animal soul, there's a godly soul. They're constantly fighting over a human being's thought, speech, and action to enact their logic and their emotions into the thought, speech, and action of a person. The thought, speech, and action of a person is one set of thought, speech, and action. And the animal soul, godly soul are fighting who is going to control what a person thinks, talks, and does. A Jew can use a fear and love of God to inspire his godly soul to be in charge at all times. And there are two ways to inspire that love, either through meditating about God or through being aware of a hidden love for God. If you use meditation, it's a deeper and stronger love. If you're just aware of this hidden love, you could have it and you could access it a lot faster and a lot easier, but it's not as deep and it won't last as long, and you constantly need to remind yourself. God is recreating the world every single second, and therefore, we shouldn't be scared of the world. If anything, the world should be scared of us. Have a good night, and appreciate you all tuning in. Shabbat Shalom.